people can.
But do please keep saying hello in the chat, and yeah, if you want to set things off, Jess.
Yeah, sure. So, hi everybody, and welcome to the library's series of open lunch sessions. Hopefully, it's a good time for you, sort of midday-ish. So this time we are going to talk about Open Research Europe and the platform that is on, which is called F1000. And we welcome a couple of speakers to the session who are Kelly Woods, who is a publisher at F1000, and Patricia, who's a research software engineer in Leeds, and she's actually used the platform. So we want to hear a bit about her experience of the sort of usability and the process that you go through in using that. And I think there's an agenda sort of roughly. So just a very short intro from me. I don't really need long. Basically, we came about the idea of hosting this because I'm part of the EU funding team in Leeds, and obviously Open Research Europe is sort of part of the EU landscape. So wanted to kind of promote that and promote the option to use this as a publisher to EU funded projects and everybody else as well, and just kind of endorse it for F1000, but then also just hear a bit about it and how we can all actually go about using it in practice. After Kelly's spoken and given us a bit of an overview of the platform, Patricia will sort of tell us a bit about her experiences as a case study, and then we'll have a chance for questions. Of course, sort of in the talks as well, please do post any questions in the Q&A and the chat. We'll have a look at those sort of as we go on, and if there's any that we can answer while you guys are speaking, we can do that and then have a discussion at the end. We are recording the session, so hopefully that's okay with you, and it'll be circulated afterwards. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Kelly. Welcome, and thanks very much for coming to talk for us today.
All right, thanks very much for the invite. Let me share my screen. Okay, perfect. So yeah, thanks Jess for the invitation and for the introduction there. So I'm going to speak today in general terms about the F1000 model and what that was supposed to be, what it is, what we're trying to do with it. And all of that is relevant for all of the platforms that we operate, including Open Research Europe. So we can apply that to that one, but we also have other options that are available under our sort of umbrella of F1000. So I'll take you through some of those. So originally, the F1000 model was designed to empower researchers by providing a publishing model that gives credit and visibility for authors as well as reviewers. So I'll talk a little bit later, but we operate on a open peer review model. So the names and institutions of the reviewers are published alongside the article, alongside their full review as well. And this maximizes the opportunity for collaborations, as well as a post-publication peer review model. So we publish the article first and then go through peer review. So this allows the early sharing of this content. And hopefully we can advance knowledge faster by sharing the research earlier. Also, to advance knowledge, we have a range of different article types that support all stages of the research journey. And the hope there is that more of that research can be discovered, and we're having less research wastage in the form of research being generated but not published in a sort of standard research article format. I'll talk a bit more about that later as well. And then finally, with making everything completely open access, we really want to engage society. So we have some article types which are geared more towards presenting the societal impact of the research findings and demonstrating the real world impact of that work. We also have a comments functionality that allows readers to engage with the content directly on the platform. And we also have plain language summaries rolled out on several of our platforms to really, again, encourage the general public or the wider audience there to engage with the research that we're publishing. So this kind of principle and this model spoke to a variety of different research organizations, including funders, institutions, and other sort of research groups. And you can see a large number of them on here. We already mentioned that we run the publishing platform for the European Commission, which is Open Research Europe, but we also run several other platforms for other major funders, such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, the Irish Health Research Board, and the National Institute for Health Research in this country as well. So I'll take you through the model now and just try to explain what these funders saw in this model and why they really felt like this was the model that they wanted their beneficiaries to publish with or on. So I mentioned that we operate on post-publication peer review. So what happens in the first stage is the authors come onto our platform and they go to submit our their research in the form of one of our article types, which I'll talk about later. This submission is a single page form. So right from the beginning, they can see everything that they are going to need to provide as part of this submission. There's nothing hidden behind pages 2, 3, 4, and 5. Everything is there, and they can track the submission through their account as well. And all of our article guidelines are published on the site for them to follow. Excuse me. Once the article has been submitted, our in-house team of professional editors will carry out a number of pre-publication checks, which I'm going to talk through in a bit more detail. And this ensures briefly that all of our policies and ethical guidelines are adhered to. This often requires a little bit of back and forth between our team and the authors themselves to make revisions at this stage before the article is published based on these checks that we're doing. Once our team is happy that we've passed all of these checks and the data has been deposited, because we do operate on a as open as possible, as closed as necessary, fair data principle, we will then publish the article. And our team remain on hand to assist with any of the revisions that we've asked for, in particular, including around depositing data, because we're aware that this is something that may be new to a lot of researchers. So once the article is published and the data has been deposited, that's when we'll start reaching out to potential peer reviewers. So authors can suggest these peer reviews within our system. We'll check to make sure that they don't have any conflict of interest and that they have the right expertise. And then we'll reach out and invite those potential peer reviewers to look at this article. As I mentioned, this is open peer review. So once the peer reviewers accept to agree to review this paper and have then submitted their review, our team will then check the review just to make sure that it is thorough and that it's in line with our code of conduct, that the feedback in it is constructive and not rude. And then we will publish those peer reviews alongside the article, and the authors will be alerted that this has happened. Once the authors have received 2 peer reviews, they will then be invited to revise their manuscript based on the reviews that they have received. They can start doing that earlier. We would just advise that they wait till they have 2 to prevent duplicity of work. And once they've revised that, they can send that new version of the article to us, and we will get that republished on the website and sent back out to those same reviewers to re-review. Once the authors have received, once the reviewers are satisfied, that the authors have made the necessary changes, the paper would be classed as having passed peer review, and that's when we would send it to a number of indexes and repositories. These do vary across our different platforms, so we'd have to have a look at which one we're interested in, but the major ones are all covered, so PubMed and Scopus, InSpec for engineering, and ERI Plus for HSS. So how do we actually ensure research integrity in a post-publication peer review model? This is a question I get quite a lot. How, it's terrifying that we can share this paper without having actually done peer review on it already. I think attitudes towards that have changed significantly since COVID, and everybody saw the value of preprints. But then off the back of that, there were some preprints that were concerning. So how do we sort of manage that situation with this publishing model? So the way we do that is we have a number of different checks that our team conduct, as I mentioned. So firstly, we will check author affiliation. So anyone with a formal affiliation with an accredited institution or a recognized organization can publish on an F1000 platform. Our editorial team will verify the author affiliations using a range of identifiers, including institutional email addresses, public profiles, ORCID accounts, etc. And for those of our platforms where are connected to a funder, we will also check that that person has received a grant from that funder and that they are eligible to publish on the platform with that grant. We'll also check for originality. So all articles that are submitted to our platforms must be original. We cannot submit work for assessment that has already been submitted either partially or in full to another publishing venue. And we run all of our papers through Authenticate software to check for this. So this will identify plagiarism, including self-plagiarism. In the event that we identify this, we get back to the authors. Sometimes these are kind of preprints of the paper, if you like, or it's been deposited on an institutional repository. So sometimes it's easily resolved. Other times it is a more serious case of plagiarism and we don't want to be publishing that. So we would get back to the authors and ask for their input on that issue. I mentioned already that we operate on an open data policy. So all underlying data must be openly available in a repository. We have a list of trusted repositories that we would recommend for different subject areas or different types of data. And this should be cited in your article as well. So you must also apply an open license to that data so other researchers can use it. And you would need to write a data availability statement explaining where your data can be found. Of course, there are instances where sharing of data is not always possible due to ethical considerations or third-party restrictions, and we have policies in place to support this. We're happy to speak to researchers about that as and when that issue comes up. Next, we check for ethics. So if your research involves human, animals, or plants, you must comply with our ethical policies, and ethical approval should have been obtained before your study begins if it involves human individuals, data, or material. And you will be asked to provide an ethical approval statement with the name of the ethics committee and the approval number which approved it. I'm saying approved a lot, apologies for that. And this ensures that research participants, and we will also ensure that any research participants have given their informed consent to take part in this study. We do ask that data be anonymized where possible, and we should have informed written consent to publish identifiable data where it cannot be anonymized. The team will also check for article types. So I mentioned we have a number of those, and I promise I will say more about that. I keep promising it, but it is coming. You will need to make sure that you've chosen the correct article type for your research. And a lot of these article types are new to researchers. So our team does check to make sure that you've chosen the right one. And if you haven't, can advise you on which one might be better suited to your article. And make sure that you fully understood the specific requirements. So they'll make sure that you followed the appropriate reporting guidelines and included sufficient methodological detail to allow for reproducibility. Oh, sorry, I skipped that. So article type, reporting guidelines, and methodology, my bad. So next, we'll check the language. Your paper must be written in good English to ensure readability, flow, and understanding of the research. That is with the exception of our Japanese institutional gateway, where we do publish content in Japanese. Our team will provide baseline editing, including correcting faulty spelling, grammar, and punctuation. But if your article requires extensive copy editing, we would reject at this point and direct you to our editing services team for additional support. We also check the papers for image manipulation. If we think that there has been any image manipulation of any of the figures in your paper, we will query that with you and maybe consult with members of our advisory board to investigate that a little bit further. And any kind of identification of research misconduct would have to be flagged to various institutions as well, as according to the COPE guidelines. We also check the funding. How was this funded? Are you including the appropriate statements and credit to your funder in your paper? Especially important for our funder platforms, of course. We'll check that the materials that you've provided is in sufficient detail to allow somebody to reproduce this work, often asking for, kind of identification numbers for the exact chemical that you used or the exact tube or whatever it is that you're researching. Excuse me. Catalog numbers and stuff. It's very detailed. And then finally, we will check for the house style. So it kind of goes back to our article types and our guidelines, just trying to make sure that everything looks nice and similar on the website when we ultimately publish them. So I did just want to take a second to get some feedback about what you thought about these pre-publication checks. So I've put a Menti poll together. So if you could go to menti.com and fill in the 8-digit number there, which is 73126828. There's a couple of questions, this being the first one. So yeah, if you could just go on there and answer a quick question about what you thought about those pre-publication checks, and we can come back to it later. Let me know in the chat if that's not working, because I'm not terribly familiar with Menti. I should do more. Okay, I see a vote coming in, so I'll move on. I'll let you carry on with that. Okay, so I mentioned a few times that we offer a range of different research outputs from the projects. We offer a range of different article types to allow you to publish all research outputs from your project. So here's an example from Open Research Europe of all the different article types that we offer. And you'll notice that some of those article types are only available for specific subject areas to which they are relevant. And this is kind of offered across there's some variation in the article types we offer across our platforms, but for the most cases, they're very similar. So this just really ensures that you are able to capture everything that you are producing as part of that research project and share it with a DOI, make it publicly available. Nothing from that funded research has been wasted or hidden behind paywalls or just in somewhere that's not very discoverable. It also allows that you can publish throughout the life cycle of your research project. So I think previously we were very much focused on waiting to the end of the project to publish that massive research article in the top tier journal. And obviously you can still do that. But we're just aware that along the life cycle of that research project, there's lots of other little interesting side avenues that you tend to go down, or maybe a new method that you've created or a new piece of software that maybe doesn't have enough space in that final research article or doesn't form part of that main story that you want to publish there. So with the alternative article types that we offer, you can actually publish that as you go, receive feedback in the form of peer review and also just from the wider community reading the paper as you're still working on that final research article at the end of your project. So again, just trying to prevent the research wastage there. I mentioned at the beginning that we operate on open peer review. This can also sometimes cause some concern for people. And I'm sure we can have a chat about that in the Q&A section later. And I'm sure Patricia might have something to say about the open peer review as well. But I just wanted to highlight a few benefits that open peer review poses. So we believe that it provides greater transparency and trust in the research process by showing, giving credit to the reviewers that have provided their review here, but also accountability for the review that they have provided. They need to stand by their statement and put their name alongside it. Just to combat that a little bit, we do offer co-reviewing as well on the F1000 platforms, whereby a more junior colleague, or perhaps if you're just saying something that you think is a little bit controversial and you feel a bit afraid to say it by yourself, you can actually co-review with someone else from your department or somebody else that you are familiar with in that research field. So yeah, I think that's a really nice feature of our platform. Oftentimes this happens behind the scenes. More junior colleagues are completing peer review reports under the name of their supervisor or whatever. So here it just brings that all out into the open and gives credit where credit is due. We also think that along with open access publishing, open peer review also provides increased opportunity for collaboration by actually telling you who your peer reviewers are. These are experts in the same field that you are working in that have, read your paper in great detail and provided hopefully insightful and constructive feedback on it. And so we'd like to identify those to you for potential future collaboration and future work together. So and then at the bottom here, I just wanted to highlight some feedback that we received from one of our authors, that he said that some of the highest quality and most useful reviews he's had on any papers anywhere were on papers published at F1000 Research. And that's not to say that they were free of criticism of the work, but I know I at least write more thoughtfully as a reviewer when I will be signing my name. And that was Professor Kevin Black, Professor of Psychiatry at the University of Washington School of Medicine. So I mentioned earlier that once you've received the reviews for your paper, you will be asked to submit a new version of the article off the back of the revisions that you've made according to what the reviewers asked you for. All versions of your article, though, do remain available on our website alongside their peer review reports. So when someone navigates to our website, you'll be able to see both the original version that was submitted and published to the site, but also any updated versions that have since been submitted to the site. And if you navigate to our site and are directed to an older version of the article, this pop-up message on the right here will come up and say, just in case you didn't know, you're actually reading an old version of this article and there's a newer version available. You can choose to suppress that message if in fact you did want to look at the older version, so you can really track the improvements that have been made across that document, or you can click the blue button to just look at the most latest version of that manuscript there. So finally, we have 3 peer review statuses that are offered to reviewers submitting reviews here. And that's approved, meaning the paper is scientifically sound in its current form and only minor, if any, improvements are suggested. Approved with reservations, which might be a number of small changes or fewer, more significant revisions are required to get that paper up to the standard it can be indexed. Or not approved, meaning there are fundamental flaws in the paper that seriously undermine the findings and the conclusions. In order for your paper to have been considered past peer review, we've set a threshold of it needing to receive either 2 approved status reviews or 1 approved status and 2 approved with reservation status. So we do allow for some disagreement here between the reviewers and some flexibility. That's why we offer the 2 different sort of thresholds there for having passed peer review. But once you have reached that threshold, your paper would then be sent to the various indexes of our platforms. It is important to note, and I mentioned this already, that once published, articles cannot be removed or published elsewhere. So even if you submit your paper and you receive all approved with reservations reviews, or perhaps even are not approved, the paper does remain as a version of record on the website. It's not rejected though. The authors have every opportunity to then go back and make amends and improve their article as requested by the reviewers, and they will then be reconsulted to re-review the revised version of that manuscript and hopefully reassess and give an improved status, either approved with reservations or approved. So we really do try to encourage authors to come back and submit additional versions and, work with the reviewers to improve that article and get it to the point it can be indexed, rather than a conventional journal simply having it be rejected and then maybe sent elsewhere to go through another round of peer review, and it's kind of creating a duplicity of work. So we're trying to remove that here by meaning the article stays here, but you can continue to work on it. So here's some of the places that the F1000 content is indexed. So I mentioned ERI Plus, Scopus, PubMed, InSpec. Obviously, all the papers are in Google Scholar even before they've passed peer review. All of our platforms, I believe, are now in the DOAJ as well. And we're working to get the platforms onto various national approved journal lists, which is proving more difficult than I thought it would be, just in terms of identifying them rather than meeting the criteria. We also have a top factor score as well. So there's a second poll on Menti, which maybe if I do that, you can access that now. And this just provides you the opportunity to add any comments about what you think about this model of publishing. It should be a free text box for you to submit, and this can maybe form the basis of some of the Q&A later. So I'll leave you to fill that in whilst I talk about the next bit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the future of the F1000 publishing model and where it sits within the wider academic publishing landscape. So Open Research Europe, which operates on this model, was identified as an example of successful implementation of Plan S in the 2022 annual report. Then in the following year, in May of 2023, I believe it was the Swedish Council of the EU conclusions, encouraged member states to support the pilot programme of ORE to create large-scale open access research publishing service, as well as later on in the document promoting open peer review practices generally, which obviously we also employ. That council conclusions also supported the recognition of diverse contributions to research, which we also have in terms of our article types. And the open data policy promotes the broadest reuse of research data, thus contributing to reproducibility, rigor, and integrity. And several of the checks that we do at pre-publications around materials, methodology, and reporting guidelines also help for these reproducibility, rigor, and integrity points. The F1000 model and ORE specifically aligns with the abandonment of inappropriate metrics such as journal impact factor, instead promoting the responsible use of individual article and the article metrics associated with that. So what's next? Specifically for ORE, we're looking to roll out multilingual publishing for metadata, including abstracts, hopefully relatively soon, later this year. And the European Commission has a bigger vision for Open Research Europe, for it to become a top quality, trusted, pan-European diamond open access publishing service, which is a mouthful. But essentially they want it to be collectively driven and owned and supported by European research funders, including themselves, and also research institutions, and provide this as a service for researchers with no author-facing fees. They also want this to be supported by an open source infrastructure, and you may have seen, if you're particularly beady-eyed, on the European Commission's tender portal, that they did actually have a tender to create an open source version of ORE that closed, I want to say, last week. So we should expect the results of that later this year as well, to see what Open Research Europe will look like in the future. And this is kind of post 2026. We have a contract, the F1000 has a contract with the European Commission to run the platform until 2026. I also wanted to mention the Coalition S towards responsible publishing proposal, because there are many features of that proposal which align very neatly with aspects of the F1000 publishing model. And I also just wanted to say that we're always looking for feedback. It's part of the reason I had these questions today, and exploring ways to improve our model to ensure that we're actually meeting the needs of the researchers that we aim to serve. So with that, my slide says thank you and questions, but I'm actually handing over to Patricia, I think, and then we'll do questions at the end, if I'm not mistaken, right, Jess?
Yeah, that's great. I think if we let Patricia speak and then do questions all at the end, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so let me share my screen. So as it was mentioned, let's first present myself. So I'm Patricia Terns. I am the research compute team leader in the moment. My background is in physics. Then after my PhD, I worked as a researcher in the urban analytics team in the University of Leeds. And now I am working more focused in software engineer related things. As you can imagine, this put me in a place where I know a little bit about some things, and then I work in this mix context of things. So let me move. The paper I published in the Open Research Europe was a paper that involved lots of simulation in a context of social science. We were trying to understand the crowd behavior, especially in some emergency situations, to see if we can identify points of problems, and then we can have actions before the situation came up. We did this in a combination of techniques. So in social sciences, it's very common using the agent-based modeling simulation kind of thing. That is pretty much having individuals, and the individuals can interact with each other as well with the environment. And then the individuals are going to behavior in a set of if decisions. So if something happens, I can do A or B or something like this. So it's a decision model. So you have a situation and then you decide what kind of thing you are going to do. And this differs from other kinds of model that usually are equation-based models. So we were trying to do this kind of simulation of people moving around. And what we noticed is that it works in the beginning. As the simulation goes, the results differ a lot from the reality. So we think, why we cannot use data simulation to include like real data, real point data, so we can control the simulation. So this data simulation, you may not be familiar, but this is used in weather forecasting. So we all know the weather forecasting for 10 days is not good, but for tomorrow is a little bit more reliable. This happens because as we move forward, we keep adding data inside our model. So I'm saying that to explain the context of the paper, that it's a mix of social science, lots of technical things, and technical things from different areas, trying to incorporate models that work in different ways. So data simulation work for equation-based models. Agent-based modeling is decision-based model. So they are very technically different, and my job was trying to figure out a way of putting everything together. And I wrote a paper, I submitted in a journal, and I got very, very bad feedbacks. I will not share everything with you because I don't want to humiliate myself over and over again, but I will share at least one or two with you. And I got this feedback that they were all hard. At the same time, they were empty, because they say this is bullshit and they don't say what exactly is wrong and how can I fix it. So I got this feedback that say that the idea is nice, but the authors are not considering the body of research, and then doesn't say what research area is. What I'm missing, if I am missing an entire body of research area, I want to know what is this, because I don't want to just publish my paper. I want to do a work that is reliable. And this feedback is hard. At the same time, it doesn't mean anything. So I could not improve. I did a work and I could not improve the work because the information that they give me was not enough. Then the same reviewer said that I just want to mention that I'm not familiar with this methodology, so I cannot give you any further opinion. And then you said now that you don't understand anything, and then before you said that I was missing an entire area. This doesn't make any sense. And this is just a small part of the feedback I got, but the thing that was worse was not the hard part of the feedback, because we can recover from that. We can make it better. We can change. We can move the direction of the research if it's necessary. The part that was worse was the frustration of passing through months of work where we submit a paper, we wait for the review, and then we get this kind of situation where I felt humiliated and I could do nothing to improve or change. Then a colleague came to me and said, you can publish in this Open Research Europe because everything is open. So even if you are truly missing an entire area, and if you are truly missing something very big in your work, the conversation is going to be made very different and you are going to have the opportunity to improve. And then I was scared because for one side, I want to know, and for other side, people are going to see my job and they are going to say that it's rubbish. And then if it's not approved, it is going to stay there very bad. And I took some time thinking about should I or not. And I think at some point I was just, don't know, I want to know, I want to talk. And in this point, I'm not even caring if it's not going to be approved. And when I submitted the paper, I was pretty sure that it would not be approved, but I was comfortable with that because I knew it that I could end in that cycle. I could see what was the problem, and then I could move forward for a better research experience in the following months. So I submitted this paper in middle of September 2021. The paper was received and passed through the editorial checks. This was very quick, less than 10 days. I had like the information about the things that I needed to fix before they published the paper. So it was like a small text fix, a missing DOI and things like that. It was easy fix. The communication was all the time very clear, very organized. The system is very straightforward. You see everything you need to do. So it was a very, very nice experience. So after I did the changes they asked me, less than 5 days, it was 4 days later, the paper was already available for people to read. Then the first review came 2 months later, and 3 months later, to be honest. 3 months later. And I was okay with that because I knew it is a paper in between areas. It's a paper difficult to find a review, so I was okay in waiting that long. But then one thing happened, because if you see, the second review came just after that, 2 weeks after the first one. But then my second version was just available 5 months later. And what happens is that when I received the first review, I got a notification, and I talked with someone in the journal, and then I was told to wait the second review before doing any changes. And then I was waiting the second review, and I didn't get any notification. And then in my head, the second review was not there. And then someone look and say, "Oh, Patricia, your second review is there for a long, long time." So I don't know if I lost the communication or what. But when I saw the second review, I got nice comments, things that make sense, and then I wrote the answer. I did the changes that were asked, and then just 10 days later, the paper was approved. And I'm happy, not because it was approved, but because I had the feeling that it was fair. And it was not fair because it was approved. It was fair because it was a clear conversation. This is right, this is wrong, this can be done. And then I think now I am enjoying a lot. Usually when I read a paper that came from this place or using a similar methodology, I am more interested in the conversation that was held between versions than in the final version of the paper itself, because it's usually in these small details where we needed to talk to make clear or to make a little change. That is like, it's usually, if I'm doing the same work, it's usually the place at the moment where I will also fail or where I will also have some kind of difficulty. So it's very nice having this kind of conversation in this difficult point of the paper, because we usually are going to trap in the same point. So I think it was a huge change, I guess, in the way that I look at this kind of situation. And I think for the future, I intend to use this kind of system and platform more, because I enjoy a lot the situation. So yeah, I will mention, it's not on the slides, but I will mention because I talked with Kelly yesterday. So one thing that was a problem for me was the citation after, because when the paper was approved, it should be indexed, and then you have 2 versions. And then I received some kind of alert saying that the first version was cited in some place, not the second. And I got some like this weird combination of numbers, and every platform was saying one thing. And then Kelly told me yesterday, probably you can come back and tell a little bit more, that you were working to make it better the connection between the links. So when I was putting together this presentation, I discovered that all these inconsistencies that I saw it in the past, they are not there anymore. So you did something that worked. So I didn't put in my presentation because it's not a problem anymore. So my paper was published in 2021, 2022. So 2 years now, you did a great work in fixing this problem. Okay, this was my side. I think we can come back to Jess and probably do the questions.
Thanks very much, Patricia. I really liked your honesty then about the problems that you've had, and it sort of makes it more sort of believable that it's a real experience, and hopefully, by the sounds of it, you said that you would use the platform again, so hopefully not too put off by your sort of not so constructive comments, but yeah, I can see that that would be disheartening.
Yeah, I think I will use the platform not just to try to publish new paper, but if I found a paper that I want, and I see the paper comes from this open idea of publication, I am usually more happy than anything else, because I know I will have access to comments and discussions and everything else. And this kind of thing is very valuable when we are trying to understand something.
Yeah. And so just thinking about how you feel about the platform now, what sort of made you choose that in the first place? Was it sort of the lower cost, or the sort of speed of the review, or?
I think for me, the most important was the fairness in the reviewing process.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So
There are a couple of questions in the Q&A, Jesse, if you
yeah, I
haven't
was just going to
got some.
say there's probably some in the chat as well. The other thing that I thought was interesting that you said was sort of the massively interdisciplinary nature of the paper, because that's something that I've wondered about before with researchers that I've worked with. Is it going to work for them, and what kind of things are they going to put together? But it sounds like it's fairly broad on what you can put through the platform in terms of the subject. So that's just an interesting part of it that I got from your talk. But another thing was that I think it was Antonio that mentioned the sort of cultural change of going to such sort of open peer review. And I just thought if that's something that you've thought about as well, Patricia, and what sort of F1000 think about that from Kelly as well.
I think from my side, I didn't think about this before, but after I thought about this a lot, and I was like, in previous paper that other situations, I always had a feedbacks that it was a little kind of annoying, like people asking to cite other papers, and then they are asking to cite their own papers or their colleagues' papers. And I think this is annoying, because if it's something that makes sense, okay, but sometimes it's just a huge no, and you do because it's the referee, they are asking why you are not going to do something they are asking. And then I start to realize that, yeah, it's important, this kind of conversation, to be open and fair for every side. So, and especially in this kind of more broad kind of research. So people are going to be more like open, that I know this part, I can say things about this part, not that other part, and so on.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak about that from an F1000 perspective as well. I actually was part of a panel, I think it was last year, but it could have been the year before now, time flies, that was organised by Eurodoc alongside PLOS, that was specifically focused on open peer review. And I think there's two elements of culture here that need to change. The first is that we kind of allow people to provide feedback, like Patricia says, that is not particularly helpful or is perhaps biased, and allowing them to ask you to cite what you assume is their own paper. So you don't know who the reviewer is perhaps, but you can make that assumption. And for some reason, we've kind of allowed that to happen behind closed doors. And perhaps we need to move to a system where actually, no, you can't just come in and say this paper is rubbish, I recommend to reject. We should be moving more towards valuable work has been done. Somebody funded this project, work has been done on this paper. How do we get it to a point where it is more valuable than it perhaps is right now? How can we help to educate other researchers? So there's that element of being a bit more constructive and collaborative in our review processes instead of just being dismissive or putting your own papers in there for your own benefit. And then the second part of it is around that fear that you mentioned, Patricia, in having these negative reviews associated with your paper. No one is perfect, especially not the first time they do something. Science isn't perfect. Research isn't perfect. Things go wrong. We learn things all the time. It's evolving. And I don't think we should be afraid of having things pointed out to us that need improvement, or, oh, we tried this and it actually worked better like that. That's supposed to be the whole point of peer review. So I think making it open, instead of assigning kind of blame or negative connotations to the author of the paper, we should just be providing praise to the reviewers for highlighting this and helping their fellow colleagues learn how to do this research more effectively and efficiently in the future. So there's kind of two angles to that.
Can I just add on to that, though, the question that specifically around underrepresented groups and these types of issues around, if you got a view on that somebody posted in the Q&A.
Oh,
I don't know if you've seen that, because there's a specific question around, we were just talking about a little bit in the chat, the fact
yeah,
that
sorry.
biases, and you might have an early career researcher, say, or commenting on a more senior researcher, and obviously when it's visible in this way, it changes the dynamic in positive ways, but also perhaps there's challenges as well.
Yeah, that is why we have our co-reviewer functionality. So in one hand, it's to allow early career researchers in particular to gain experience in reviewing whilst gaining credit for doing that review. I think historically that happens anyway, but they don't get the credit for it. And then secondly, it's to provide that little bit of backup. If you are reviewing somebody's paper and you are afraid to say what you really feel about it because you don't want that to have negative implications for you when you go up for promotion or tenure or for your next grant, for example, we can add the co-reviewing onto that as well. So you can review it with a more senior member of your team, or even just another person in your research department, not necessarily more senior than you, just to give more backup to, okay, I'm not alone in thinking this. And that kind of comes back to this culture element as well. I think rather than encouraging people to restrict what they say in peer review reports for fear of negative implications, we should be really coming down hard on people that are making these decisions based on bias from people giving them negative feedback on their papers. So it really needed to change the whole culture of the system, which I think is partially why it takes a while. Nothing is going to happen in a short space of time when you're trying to make.
Antonio made, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jess, I was just.
Yeah, sorry, I was just having a look through the chat then as well. There's something that you asked earlier on, Nick, was about whether it filters for AI, and I think
that was just I don't even know what the state of the art is with that. You mentioned the plagiarism detector, and obviously everybody's so preoccupied now with generative AI and the fact that people be using it to write papers and that kind of thing. It's not an area I know a huge amount about. I guess you've been thinking about it. I was just interested.
We definitely have, and we are looking at more ways that we can pull AI into doing these sorts of checks. I
don't just mean the checks, but actually people using it to write stuff as well.
Yeah. So there's two things there. We are trying to use AI to identify issues in papers, but we're also trying to use AI to identify AI-generated papers as well. So something that has been found is that these AI written papers or these paper mill papers often cite each other to try to get their own citations up on their own paper mill citations. So paper mill publications, sorry. So there is software, I can't remember the name of it now. It was presented at the recent APE conference. I'll try and find it and put it in the chat afterwards, but that is looking to do exactly that. So to help identify these papers, then areas of the text that are written by AI. So we are looking internally at how we can combat that, but also how we can use AI to improve the level of the checks that we can do, still always being supported by humans. I think we're definitely not at the point yet where we can hand this over to AI completely and say, is this manuscript good? Okay, great. Definitely not. We have a very expert team who do these checks, and we're not looking to replace them with computers quite yet.
Thank you. There's just another one that's come in that is asking why the articles that aren't approved are not removed from the website. If they get published in a different journal later, how would the reader be redirected to that?
So they would not be published on another journal later, because they have already been published on our platform. So they cannot be resubmitted elsewhere. If they were to be resubmitted to another journal, that journal should pick that up as self-plagiarism in their own checks that they are doing, assuming they are doing them. Which is partially why I asked the question earlier on about what you thought about the stringency of the check. So even if a paper has received a negative review on our site, it will remain there to encourage the authors to make those necessary changes if they can and improve that article. Obviously, if there are real ethical concerns or reasons that you would normally retract a paper in other journals, that still stands. So we can still retract papers if we have real underlying issues with them, but just in terms of getting a negative review, that's not really enough of a reason. I think rather than taking it and sending it to somebody else and asking for another opinion and another opinion and another opinion, actually do some work first based on the reviews that you've already received, and then we'll see. There was a question about how peer reviewers can have biases and what if you have concerns that the peer reviewers have unfairly reviewed your submission. That's totally fair. This does happen sometimes. I have to say it's not something that we see very often. I think it's less likely with open peer review than with closed peer review, but it does still happen. In that instance, we would recommend that you get in touch with our editorial team and let them know that you feel like the reviewer is being unfair. It's worth mentioning that if we receive 2 peer review reports that are wildly different, we will look to get a third as well, just to see where's the middle ground here, where are we coming down? And these are the kinds of cases where we would engage our advisory boards. So we have a scientific advisory boards on all of these platforms who have expertise in each of the specific areas that are covered by those publishing platforms. We would then reach out to them to ask them to give their expert but unrelated opinion, non-biased opinion on whether the review is fair or whether they are asking too much. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. Somebody just asking for a bit of clarity on revisions and resubmissions, presumably as long as you have acted on the comments that are on the paper, you can sort of reiterate.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, as long as it passes all of our pre-publication checks, we don't have real serious ethical concerns about it, and we're confident that the science is sound, we will most likely publish the paper. So then you will get the opportunity to go through peer review and revised. Even if the reviewers provide the not approved review, it's not a rejection. The paper will still be there and you can still go ahead and revise. In the event that we do reject your paper at that early stage, maybe because you can't provide us with the data or we have ethical issue concerns or whatever, if you can address those concerns, you are then more than welcome to come back, resubmit, tell us how you've addressed them, and we'll reconsider your paper.
That's great, thank you. I don't know, unless I've missed anything, whether there's any more that we haven't kind of covered.
No, just ask a final call for any questions. I just wanted to ask, we were chatting yesterday and you mentioned a library, because there's probably, I'm guessing there's library colleagues, well I know there's library colleagues on this call, that you had an advisory group of librarians, and we also had a vague conversation around could universities or institutions potentially use this platform as well?
So a couple of things there. I'll grab the link to the Librarian Advisory Board group, and that's something that we set up specifically for Open Research Europe with LIBA, who are one of our partners on that project, to gain insights from the librarian community around, how can librarians and publishers work together to promote open models of publishing or encourage researchers to engage in these different models of publishing and move away from your sort of standard GIF that we're all trying to in theory, get away from. So there's that. And then the second part of your question was about institutions getting involved. So from 2026, the European Commission is looking to create or to turn Open Research Europe into a more truly collaborative platform. So they don't want to own it anymore for like legal financial reasons that I won't bore everyone with, but if you really want to know, hit me up because I know all about the EU bureaucracy now. But they're looking to hand over ownership to a separate third-party organisation, and then other national funders, including themselves and institutions, will be able to pitch in to that model and pay a certain fee. I'm not sure what it will be, but pay a contribution to that platform to sort of cover the APCs for everyone that's publishing. So the idea and the vision is that they will remove all eligibility criteria from Open Research Europe and have it as a sort of collaboratively funded diamond open access publishing platform for all. So if you're interested to get involved in that, I can put you in touch with the European Commission, but bear in mind that this is a number of years off at the minute, 2026. 2027 possibly, but they are looking for people that are interested in collaborating with them on that sort of project. And then separately from that, if you're looking for something a little bit more smaller scale, just for your own researchers to get involved in, F1000 have gateway spaces on their website for a variety of different research institutions, including UCL, Max Planck. We have stuff, so you can set up a publishing space specifically for your researchers on F1000 Research, where you can pay the funds centrally or the authors still pay. We're happy to sort of discuss how that might work.
Just on that note, Kelly, sorry, Jess, but I'm just conscious of time, and there was a particular question. So somebody's just, Alexis posted about the article processing charges, and I'm not sure you've really discussed the business model, because it's free for authors, and so the Gates Foundation or Open Research Europe actually paid the fees, don't they, for their platforms, whereas there's a charge for F1000. So I don't know if you want to say something about that.
Yeah, so I mentioned that we have these partners with the funders. So yeah, HRB, NIHR, Wellcome, Gates, Open Research Europe, and there are a few others. Those are kind of a diamond model of publishing, because the authors can publish at no cost to them, and the funders will pick up the cost. We charge the funders directly. And the other platforms that we run, such as F1000 Research itself, Health Open Research, and a number of other platforms, they do operate on a gold open access publishing model, where there are APCs that are payable by the authors directly. So we do have a combination of both approaches at the minute.
Probably.
Right. Well,
leave it to you, Jess. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I think, given we've got a minute to go, just a minute to say thank you to Patricia and Kelly for joining us. And I see, Antonio, you're keen for a follow-up, maybe in a few months with some developments.
So Antonio wants to go to Brussels, he says.
Oh, he wants to go to Brussels. Okay, well, yeah, do that too.
As well as.
As well, yeah.
I'm in Brussels a fair bit, so maybe I'll see you there.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. It's also nice to share my struggles and my problems and my humiliations as well. So come with me every time you need.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming, everyone. I mean, I'll stick around for a few minutes. I'll stop recording now, because I'm always conscious as well that might affect people's willingness to ask questions, etc. So I'll stop recording.